Hello, everyone. Shalom, shalom. I'm tonight. This class I'm giving in recording because I don't expect to be available this week. Hopefully, we'll work something out for future weeks. Um, this coming Shabbos, this coming Shabbat, we are reading in the Torah portion the Ten Commandments. And I wanted to go through a little overview of the Ten Commandments. It is found in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, and there's also a review of it in the book of Deuteronomy at the beginning of chapter 5. But what's going to be read in the Torah this week is the first rendition of it in chapter 20 of the book of Exodus. Mostly, both renditions say the same thing. The first one was said at Mount Sinai itself. The second one was recited later by Moses, when he reviewed what had happened in the desert. So it's really a review of it. There are slight variations in some of the wording between the two renditions, and the rabbis work out why it is. Example would be, let's say, in the rendition in the book of Exodus, it says, "Zochar es yom haShabbos lekadsho." Remember the day of Sabbath to keep it holy. On the in the version in Deuteronomy, it says, "Shomer es yom haShabbos lekadsho." Remember the Sabbath day. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And rabbis say that really, Shomer v'zochar b'diber echad nemru. Remember and observe was said at once. God said one thing, but we heard it as two different things. We processed it as two different messages. We heard God said once, we heard twice. How does that work? Well, first thing, it's miraculous, but maybe a partial example of that would be, let's say, our experience of thunder and lightning. There's one event in the sky, one electrical disturbance up there in the clouds, but we experience it as two phenomena. One phenomena is lightning, and the other phenomena is thunder, but really it came from the same exact disturbance in the sky. When it reached the aspect of it that reached our eyes, we see as lightning, and the aspect of it that reached our ears, we hear as thunder. But really it was just one event. So too, God said one thing, and we heard two. Another aspect of the Ten Commandments is that, if you look at most of it, it's just talking straight, everyday human behavior, much of it. Don't kill, don't kidnap, don't swear falsely, meaning be honest, honor your parents, don't desire your fellow's wife or your fellow's other possessions. You would think that these are very mundane things. Why do we need the God of the universe to come down at Mount Sinai? He didn't literally come down, but to reveal himself at Mount Sinai and to tell us this. Much of this human beings figured out on their own. At least you would imagine so. So the answer is that that's really what it is. It's true. According to Jewish tradition, the Jewish people saw the entire heavens open up the way Ezekiel saw it in the first chapter of Ezekiel. If you read that story there, that's what the Jews saw that at the time of receiving the Torah. But, what God was saying, I am so infinite, I am so great, that I care even about the small stuff. The small stuff doesn't escape my notice. If you look at the nations of the world, who have worshipped idols, there's a certain kind of idolatry that does believe in God all the way at the top, and then there are semi-deities, semi-gods below God, like you have a king, and then you have a minister, and a lower minister, and a lower minister, till you get down to the peasant, a whole hierarchy. And this is how they believe, So you have so you have the main big God. He's the God on the top, and then small things like love, success. For that, you have to go out to the lower deities, just like a human being would have to go to the lower ministers. You can't go to the king. You can't get an audience of the king, so you have to go to the lower ministers. So that's how certain versions of idolatry, view their relationship with God. You need to go to the intermediaries. And but that's what God is saying I'm not about. God is saying, no, if you're, what true infinity, the true infinite one, is so infinite that the big and small is equal to him. There's nothing too big and nothing too small for his notice. And yes, when you pray to God, even for the small stuff, he hears, because there's nothing too small for him. That's what it means to be truly infinite. Truly infinite means no limits. There's nothing that limits him, and therefore there's nothing too small for his notice. So let's go to look at the Ten Commandments themselves. The first one is, I am God, your Lord, who brought you out of Egypt from the place of slavery. Okay, so it's very interesting. Why didn't God say, I am God, your Lord, who created heavens and earth? Why does he say, I'm God, your Lord, who took you out from the place of slavery? Isn't it true that God created heavens and earth? Doesn't it say so in the book of Genesis? Isn't this part of his greatness, this magnificent creation that never ceases to dazzle us? It's so dazzling. The sages tell us that if all the wise men in the world came together and put their minds to work at it, they could not create a single tiny insect. And look what God creates all the time. So if we're looking at this, this is pretty shocking that God would address us as, I am the one who took you out from Egypt. This is the basis for our relationship. Not that I created heaven and earth, but I took you out from Egypt. That would seem much smaller than creating heaven and earth, than creating the big cosmos. And not only, does the book of creation talk about creating the physical universe, which, light years upon light years large, huge, amazing. It means also the creation of the spiritual realms filled with angels and many, many levels of spiritual realms filled with even more angels, where many levels of angels live, many levels of souls live. How can that be compared to taking a nation out of Egypt? So the great medieval sage Rabbi Yehuda Halevi had answered this question as follows. He said, if this is exactly the point. God is saying the basis for our relationship is that I revealed myself to you. See, creating heaven and earth isn't me revealing myself to you personally. That's not the basis for creation. A philosopher could really think deeply, and like Abraham did in his early days, he thought deeply and philosophized that there must be one creator. You could get that without a revelation. That could occur through philosophy. You look at the heavens and earth and surmise that how can this wonderful creation exist without a creator. If I were to show you a beautiful book and I told you that some ink spilled on a page and out came a beautiful book, you laugh at me. So how can we say that? So obviously, if a thinking person, a deep thinking person, can come up with that on his own, God's saying that's not the basis of our relationship. Philosophy is not the basis of our relationship. The basis of a relationship is that I am here revealing myself to you, that I took you out of Egypt, that you should worship me on this mountain, as God told Moses at the burning bush. This mountain means Mount Sinai. That I am revealing myself to you. That is what's the basis of our relationship. So, and obviously, so let's go to the next verse. Do not have any other gods before me. Not to have any other gods before him means no other deities. Obviously, this is telling a Jew you must be monotheistic. You must believe in one God. That's what a Jew has to believe. That's what a Noahide has to believe. There's no difference in that. I mean, it's there's some who question whether a Noahide could have partners with God, but basically, that's not really a desirable situation. So, the belief in one God applies to both Jews, Noahides, applies to all humanity. Do not represent me. Do not represent such gods by any carved statue or picture, anything in the heaven above or the earth below or in the water below the land. In other words, do not bow down to such gods or worship them, for I am God your Lord, who demands exclusive worship. So God, anything God created is not allowed to be worshipped. Like I said earlier, those who, there is a kind of idolatry that believes in God as the oneness, but believes he's unreachable. You need to appeal to lower spiritual forces, the forces of nature. We believe that, there are forces of nature, but they're creations. Just like nature itself is a creation, so too the forces of nature are creations. They're not worthy of worship. Okay, so let's go to the third. I'm going to skip a couple of verses. Let's go to the third commandment. Do not take the name of God, your Lord, in vain. Do not allow God will not allow the one who takes his name in vain to go unpunished. Now, it's true this is not technically one of the main 7 Noahide laws, but this still applies to a Noahide too, because one of the mitzvot, one of the commandments given to a Noahide is to set up a court of justice, to stand up for justice. And where does such an oath take place? Such as, a person swears, takes an oath. It takes place in the context of a court or some legal proceeding. When a person makes an oath and he uses God's name, then the person has to say it truthfully. This would apply to a Noahide as well. And then the fourth commandment is about the Sabbath. Obviously, a Noahide is not supposed to keep the Sabbath. You can keep it as in the sense of coming to worship and in the sense of recognizing it as a day special to God if you want. But a Noahide equally is allowed to go to work and allowed to, conduct business on the Sabbath. But this much I will say. If you happen to be in a nation, in a part of the world where your work situation allows you to take off one day a week and it's equally take off Sunday or Saturday, probably it's better to take off Saturday and to spend some time in prayer, extra time in prayer on that day. That I'm not saying for sure because, Okay, the fifth commandment, honor your father and mother. Now, this commandment of honoring your father and mother, by the way, I'm not reading every word here. I'm just, touching highlights. This command of honoring your father and mother, although it's not one of the seven Noahide commandments, it was accepted by the Noahides. And because it was accepted by non-Jews throughout the world at large, even idol worshippers, therefore, because it was accepted, God put his stamp of approval on it, and a Noahide is is required to honor his parents. There's several stories in the Talmud of a special person who wasn't Jewish, but went through extreme measures to honor his parents, and God rewarded him for it. His name was Dama ben Nesina. Dama ben Nesina had some precious gems that were required for the high priest's breastplate. High priests have a breastplate filled with 12 precious gems. Precious gems meaning precious stones. And one of those stones, it was rumored that Dama ben Nesina's father had one of those stones, and it was needed for the service in the temple. So a delegation of rabbis came to the home of Dama, and they said, we'd like to buy the stone from your father. They said, my father is very protective of the stone. Right now he's sleeping because he's so protective of the stone. It's under his pillow. He's sleeping on it. I can't wake him. It's not proper. So rabbis thought, well, maybe he wants a higher price. So they bid for a higher price. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. My father's asleep. He said, bid even higher. They kept bidding higher. Okay. After a while, they saw he refused, so they left. The Talmud says that that when Dama ben Nesina's father awoke, Dama came running after the rabbis and said, come, I'll sell you the stone. And they said, okay. And they were ready to pay the highest price they had bid. And Dama said, no, I'm only taking the original price. I was sincere. My father was asleep. I was honoring my father. I didn't want to wake him. So the Talmud says, because of Dama's extreme attentiveness to honoring his father, the very next year, God gave Dama a red heifer in his flock, a red cow, which is its ashes is needed for in order to purify people. So now the red heifer was a lot more expensive than that precious stone. And the next year, when the rabbis needed a red heifer for the temple service, they came to Dama's home, and they bought this red baby cow for a huge price, which was its fair price. And God had rewarded Dama in that way, and I'm sure he rewarded him in the next, not only in this world, but in the next world as well. So we see that God has high regard for Noahides who honor their parents. Okay, the sixth commandment, do not commit murder. This, of course, applies to Noahides. It applies actually so strongly that I was told by one of my rabbis that it's the only of the seven Noahide laws that if it was committed accidentally, a Noahide is still responsible for. For example, if a Noahide didn't know different and accidentally ate, let's say, limb of that was amputated from a living animal, didn't know that this was a limb amputated from a living animal, so the Noahide is exempt. Or a Noahide was never taught about idolatry and monotheism versus idolatry, and grew up in a world where they were worshiping idols. He's not held responsible for that. He's not held responsible, but he may have to come back still to worship properly, but he's not held responsible. However, for murder, even accidentally, there is no excuse, and it applies even to abortions, a baby in the womb. Of course, if the mother's life is in danger, that's a different story, because a Noahide is entitled to self-defense. So one is allowed to do what's necessary to defend one's own life, but just for convenience to abort a child when because there's going to be social or financial ramifications. This is not permitted to a Noahide. It's murder. Um, Also, taking the life of a person who is, who's very, very sick, and you think, he's dead anyways. It's only gonna be another day or another few hours. Let's pull the plug in the hospital or something like that. That's also forbidden for a Noahide. So these are, so these are the, so murder is a very serious thing. Now it's very interesting. The first five of the Ten Commandments are between man and God. The last five of the Ten Commandments are mitzvot, between man and man. If you'll notice, the first five have to do everything in relation with God. One God, the Sabbath, don't take oaths in vain, um, but the last five, they have to do with between people. Don't murder, don't kill, which don't steal, which we're going to learn is don't kidnap, do not commit adultery. That's between man and man. So, but there's an interesting anomaly. Honoring your parents, this mitzvah is actually on the first five. It's the fifth. It's on the first five, the first set of tablets, the first five of the tablet, first tablet. Not on the second tablet. We say, but that's between human beings. It's a relation between human beings. No, 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 no. Honoring your parents is like honoring God. That belongs on the first tablet, because that's like honoring God. God takes it so seriously when a person honors his or her parents that God considers it as if the person extended honor to himself. That's why it's on the first set of tablets. It's on the first tablets. Okay. The next one: do not commit adultery. For a Noahide, it works a little differently than for a Jew. For a Noahide, it's if two people are living together with a commitment, even if there was no formal marriage ceremony, they're considered married, and anyone who sleeps with that woman is considered to have engaged in adultery. Also, Noahides are not allowed to sleep with siblings that are from the same mother. They share a mother. They can't. That's forbidden. And obviously, a Noahide cannot sleep with father or with a parent. So for Noahide, marriage just means that they're living together with a commitment. Divorce means that they separate. They decide to separate. It's what's called in American English common law marriage. That is, in fact, considered marriage for a Noahide. The eighth commandment: do not steal. Now, there's a proviso over here. Our sages say that since the Torah speaks about stealing elsewhere, therefore this stealing is, and it comes right after murder, and adultery, so it's something more serious than just, obviously stealing is forbidden to a Noahide. It's one of the 7 Noahide commands, but this is something that is uniquely serious. This refers to kidnapping. Kidnapping means you steal a person and you impress the person into slavery or sell the person for ransom. That's what this commandment, do not steal, is referring to. By Jewish tradition, that's what despite the way it sounds, that's what this is talking about. Do not kidnap. meaning do not steal a person and then sell the person for ransom or make the person to a slave. Ninth commandment, do not testify as a false witness against your neighbor. As I mentioned before, Noahides are enjoined to keep a system of fair justice. So this commandment applies to Noahides in the sense of, under the rubric of a fair system of justice. And the next, do not be envious of your neighbor's wife, his slave, his maid, his ox, his donkey, or anything else that is your neighbor's. You're not, now, obviously this is not one of the 7 Noahide commandments. For a Jew, this is a direct commandment. However, it's a good trait to practice, a good character trait to acquire, not to be jealous of what others have. And it helps you in your relationship with God, because what it says is, God gave me what I need for my spiritual journey, and He'll always provide me what I need for my spiritual journey on this earth. I do not need what others have for that journey. What they have is meant for, what God decided is what they need. What I have is what God decided I need. And with that, basically, is a nice summary of the 10 Commandments. It was a pleasure. If you have any questions, please ask Baruch Shalom, and he will email me, and I'll be happy to answer, and hope either in email or sometime in the near future in person. Okay, take care. It was a pleasure. Shalom, shalom.